Here we're standing actually by the wheelwright shop looking at the Holstein cotton gin, which was moved here in 1993. By chance, that particular year, I had found well, I really wasn't sure what it was. It was the size of a card table, which turned out to be the original cotton gin to another cotton house. And I sent a picture to the Smithsonian. They called me the day they got it and said I had one of 11 pre-Civil War cotton gins in the country. They said the only operating one was in Georgia, at a little place called Westville, Georgia, a museum there, which I carried my engineer friend, a retired engineer, and his family, and Tom Bishop, along with Harold Starnes and his wife, to visit them. I flew them down to Georgia. We copied everything that they did. They ran the cotton gin, hooked the mules up to it, came back, and Tom restored this original cotton gin. And so I was really excited. I have the cotton gin, which is very small. Now I needed to have a cotton house to go with it. Well, I flew to Tarboro, North Carolina, looked at the one there. I flew to Lexington, South Carolina, a small one, and we'd seen the one in Georgia. Now, if you look on the back door, you'll see a picture of the small one in Lexington, probably a fourth the size of the one we're standing here. So I had enough logs and extra lumber to build one. That'd be a reproduction. And during Christmas that year, I was with my father-in-law in South Carolina and telling him how excited I was about getting ready to do a reproductive cotton gin. And he said, Bobby, said, don't do that. Let me give you one that's been in our family for like 5 or 6 generations in the backyard here, about 100 yards behind the house we were talking from. And went out and looked at it, and he said, yeah, your wife has played in it as a child. And under it, there were a lot of tractors and hay. And so in 1993, probably 2 months after that, we cranked it up, the trucks and trailers, and took them down there and heading back this way. And I was a little bit overloaded, and the guy driving my dump truck said, Doc, I said, I don't have the money to pay the fine. So I told him I'd drive, and after about 100 miles, he said, we better let the tires cool off. It's kind of low, and we pulled off the side of the road, and he said, we can't stop here. And I said, why? And he looked up and pointed. There's a highway patrolman lived there at his house, and the patrol car was in front of the house. And he said, if he gets up, and it was about daylight that time, he said, if he gets up and goes to the bathroom and looks out of the window, I said, we're in big trouble. So we moved it on down another couple of 100 yards. But probably the most interesting thing about it is the fact that the sheriff here, is a good friend of mine, probably 2 years later was at the South Carolina sheriff's meeting, and eating lunch with one of the sheriffs from South Carolina, and he asked him where he was from, and he said, I'm from Hickory, North Carolina. And he said, Hickory, North Carolina. Remember, this is 2 years later, Hickory, North Carolina. He said, you know, I was eating at a little restaurant just on the borderline of North Carolina, South Carolina line, and I looked out, and you're not going to believe what I saw in this trailing dump truck. He said, I jumped up and looked at it, and it was out of state. He said, you know how hard it is to get a mattress out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning? He said, about that time, they put my breakfast back on the table, and I said, I just copied the tag and traced it the next day to a guy named Hart, Hickory, North Carolina. Well, David Huffman was the sheriff at that time. He's retired now, and David said, I know exactly where that thing went. So, you know, people were picking cotton by hand, and they had little handmade cotton gins, and there's several of them inside. And you can pick a pound an hour with 3 ladies. You can see the picture of them trying to separate the seed from the cotton. And the cotton gin itself does 50 pounds an hour. And when Eli Whitney watched the people out in the fields pick the cotton and separate the seed, within a few years he developed the cotton gin, and this was in 1793. And America at that time was generating about $150,000 a year. And after the invention of his cotton gin, it jumped to 8 million, which really helped industrialize the South. As you go inside upstairs, Tom Tucker, that built the cotton press itself and the covered bridge, has donated to Hart Square an original copy of not only the cotton gin, but also the covered bridge. It's an exact model, an exact replica of both of them. Now, you can walk inside now, and Robert Campbell will show you how to gin cotton in the original cotton gin.
I'm Bob Campbell, and I'm run the cotton gin at Hart Square on their festival days. I was going to show you a little bit about the cotton gin. This is one of 9 gins in existence in America, old gins. Bob was fortunate enough to find the gin on a porch in Asheville, and from that he went along to collect the building. He was searching to build a building, and then found out his wife's father had a building that had been in there, their barn. It turned out to be old cotton gin that was for this type of gin. Most gin houses that were big when they were producing so much cotton had several gins in them to produce more out of the building. This is a mule-drawn cotton gin, and the mules are in the floor below, and there's a gear train that's got a ratio of about 40-to-1 in the wrong direction, so the mule can walk around one time and it makes this wheel turn around 40 times, and then that makes this go around a bunch of times. And the gin, the way it works is here. Really the way the gin works is it has a wheel like a saw blade that's rolling around, and it's got a comb, and the saw blade goes through the comb, and when it does, the seed can't go through the comb, so it pulls some fibers off the seed, and then the seed falls back down, and there's a brush on the back side that takes the cotton off of the saw blade, and then the saw blade continues going around, and when the seed gets most all the fiber off of it, it falls through a crack in the bottom of the box and goes into it. And I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. But it was real simple, a device to do that. So I can take the gin apart before we start. This is the stop and go pole here. You hit it once to go and twice to stop. So we'll check that out in a few minutes. But the cotton gin, as you can see, these are the saw blades that are turning this direction. And this is the seed box that catches the seeds that have most of the fiber off of them. So the cotton with the seed is hanging in here, and these blades pick it up and pull the fiber through here. There's a brush in the back that swiping the cotton out of the blades. The blade, I don't know whether you can see it very well or not, but it's got little teeth in it. And this brush is a fan, plus it pulls the cotton off of the wheels and throws it down a chute, and it's collected in the bottom where it's going to be baled. Okay, so here we are on the demonstration for the cotton gin. And I've got the go stick, and I'll hit the stick and it'll start going, and then I'll drop the seeds down in these wheels, and you can see the cotton pulling through. And as the operator stands here, if you put too many in there, it wears the horses out. So I won't work it long because the horses don't like it. But anyway, that's pretty much it. And then it's pulling the seeds off, pulling the cotton off the back, and it's going around and making a fan to blow it out the bottom. So an operator will stand here and hand feed based on the load that's on the horses. Now when you get ready to give them a rest, that's a whoa signal. So that's all there is to the cotton gin, just a saw blade and a comb, and you end up with something that somebody looks at and says, well, I can build one of those. I don't need Eli Whitney to do it. And so that's the reason he never made any money out of the invention. When the cotton gin was invented, there was 500,000 pounds of cotton grown in America. 10 years later, there's 93 million pounds grown. 60 years later, there was 1 billion pounds grown. That was the half of all the economy in America. 50% of the exports were cotton. And that made the South have some industry. Another fact about the cotton gin is this green cotton, since it will grow anywhere, as it became more proliferated, it moved south. It went to Mississippi and Alabama and on to Texas. And every state that started growing cotton needed slaves because it took so many people and so much labor to plant and pick the crop. So because of all the states that grow cotton were turning to slave states, the Civil War was one of the main reasons it started was to keep a whole of America become slave states, and they trying to stop the slaves. But the cotton just kept being bigger and bigger and bigger crop, and they were supplying to the world at that point.